Hello, this is a game philosopher, and today we're talking about asking questions. Such questions could be, why did I not publish the video I wanted to publish? Well, that's a simple question. Thank you very much. So, the reason why is because I pretty much decided that it would have been very repetitive. I didn't want to repeat the same thing over and over again, especially within one series, and save that topic for a different video series where it would have been more relevant. Now, for today, this is actually the last video for the How to Argue series. That is the logical side of it, because next week I'm going to go into what's called rhetoric and try to have a more how to be persuasive series. So I recommend to stay tuned for next Wednesday when it comes to that, or next Thursday, or next Friday, whatever you want. I don't know how you're going to watch these videos. If you're watching this video many years after it was published, I don't care. So just keep tuned in for more in the future. But for this video, we're asking questions. We're talking about asking questions. A lot of people are very fallacious when it comes to asking questions. I don't mean fallacious as in logical fallacy wise, but in efficiency. This is what I mean by fallacious. So, a lot of times people will try to argue within their questions. In fact, you see this happen a lot when you watch C-SPAN. And when you watch C-SPAN, you see them being like, "So, why did you do this? Um, did you not know that this is a very whatever?" Or they might present evidence and attack you with the evidence as opposed to actually asking a question. So it's an argument within a question. Now, a lot of people do this. It's very tempting to do, but that's not really how you do it. Now, people do it for all sorts of reasons. They might be doing it to try to frame a question as an argument to try to get you to respond. Now, what I say is you should save that stuff for the actual argument itself. You should not be asking the question and try to argue at the same time because you will confuse and muddy things up, especially since you're not clear at first as to what's going on or why the person did this or why they think that or what what are they actually thinking. So, better way to ask questions, in my opinion, is to ask questions about meaning. To ask who or why, what, how. Now, this is very elementary stuff, but a lot of people they go beyond it. And so when you are asking stuff like that, trying to get the questions out to try to get clarity, you're trying to get your opponent's argument in the best light possible. Best light doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to be excellent, that you're still manning them. Best light really just means kind of a focused light, trying to zero in on exactly what is being said and to get rid of all the muddy fog. It's kind of like cleaning a dirty window so you can look outside, or defrosting a window during the winter. Now, just as you would take a uh, car out that has a very dirty window where you can't see, that you would have to clean first, you wouldn't rush into an argument if you do not know what's actually being said. Now, something might sound off, and if something does sound off, you shouldn't be rushing straight ahead to try to sell it. Instead, what you should be doing is you should be asking the questions, important questions, trying to get people to think about things and to explain things to you. And if they can't, if you find some areas of contention, that's where you might apply your argument. But you're not going to apply your argument right away when you don't even know what's being said. In fact, this is why a lot of people are afraid of debates, especially online. People will attack other people very quickly. They're not going to ask questions and try to clarify, get things to be clarified, but they're going to be like, uh, "Do you not know that this is wrong?" Stuff like that. That's not how you do it. How you want to do it is exactly as they say. Ask to try to frame the argument in the best light possible. You want to make this argument clear to you. And only then do you argue. And when you do your arguments, either you can do demonstrative arguments. Of course, that should sound like common sense, but if not, a demonstrative argument would be one that demonstrates a truth. Um, of course, this is a superficial definition, but it still works. A hypothetical argument, which is also known as a priori, you're trying to uh, show how a certain mindset would be important within your syllogism. A simple mindset would be rational to think. And then you have your arguments from induction, your arguments from deduction, which go along similar lines. Induction, of course, being that you take the small and you expand it out. Deduction meaning you take the big and you come in with it. So, of course, I already talked about syllogisms in an earlier video. Please watch them. Please watch the rest of my series up to this point because this is the last video, like I said. I will not do any more on this series. In fact, my next series is going to be the persuasion series, how to persuade, right? Go out to elegance. But anyway, when someone puts you in a paradox, when someone asks questions to put you in a paradox, which will happen a lot because a lot of times people do this either intentionally or non-intentionally. They try to put you into these paradoxes and overthrow your argument through sophistry. This is a very difficult thing to overcome because a lot of times people exploit vagueness just because they're not really asking the right questions. They're not trying to come at an understanding. They're trying to make you look bad. It's instead of trying to persuade you of anything or hear what you have to say. So a lot of times, this type of stuff, which of course causes people to fight a lot. What you want to do with it is be very careful with your definitions. Make sure they're sensible definitions. You got to test your stuff beforehand before you throw it out. You have to make sure very carefully that someone agrees with your definitions. You have to be very careful to make sure that someone knows your categories very well and how you're categorizing things. And of course, you always have those people who are very vague and say truth is subjective. What you do with those people is ignore them. Because they're not going to want to get into much deep discussion because they stop at a very vague area saying truth is subjective or relative. They're not going to think too much about things. But of course, you could also give them a very simple argument. This very simple argument is if truth is subjective, why then would you say that my truth, which is that there is such a thing as falsehood, is false by saying that truth is subjective? Because ultimately speaking, you're affirming that I am right if I believe that something is false and that falsehood exists, and that I might not always be right. And so that's the big thing. Now, an argument can be called fallacious in four senses according to Aristotle. When it appears to be brought to a conclusion and it really is not so, this is what is called contentious reasons. When it comes to a conclusion but is not to the conclusion proposed, which happens principally in the case of reductiones ad impossibilities. Sorry, I haven't looked at Latin in a while. If my Latin sounds off, that's why. Um, when it comes to the proposed conclusion, but not according to the mode of inquiry appropriate to the case, as what happens when a non-medical argument is taken to be a medical one, or one which is not geometrical for a geometrical argument, or one which is not dialectical for a dialectical argument, whether the result reached to be true or false. if the conclusion to be reached through a false premise of which this type, the conclusion is sometimes false, sometimes true. For while a false conclusion is always the result of false premises, it is that a true conclusion may be drawn even from false premises that are not true, as was said above. So there's a lot more arguments that are fallacious in that type, but you always have to think about what that was. Aristotle's telling us here that we have to be very, very, very careful because our premises can be false. Our uh, premises can be nonsensical to the conclusion. And pretty much if you follow these four guidelines, which Aristotle just said, what you will do is you'll have a much more sensible argument. But if you're going to ask questions, do not try to mess things up, like I said. And the big thing about not messing things up is, of course, to have goodwill. And when you have goodwill, you know that your opponent is not really an opponent. He's just someone else who's trying to understand the world as you're trying to understand it as well. So you're trying to seek clarity together. And when this happens, you could respectfully refute. And that's all it's all about is respect. And you're not trying to overthrow. You're trying to bring people together. You're trying to send out an argument so that people can understand and get closer to the truth. Arguments are not scary. Arguments are fun. They're very beautiful. But only if you take very careful steps. Watch my entire series of How to Argue. I think you will enjoy arguments if you follow these words of advice that I have laid out, especially from the Oregonin. Now, if you want to learn how to persuade, that's a different matter altogether. Stay tuned for next week on around Wednesday. I will publish a new video, which will start my new series. Also, if you want to look at my other thing that's going on since I'm implementing a new strategy uh, this week, stay tuned for the next video. I have not decided yet exactly what I'm going to do with it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be fun. In fact, what I'm probably going to end up doing with this Saturday slots is I'm probably just going to publish some video essays, and it's going to be on various topics. So please look forward to that. I'll see you next time. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me if you enjoyed the How to Argue series in the comments. Also, tell me, has there ever been a time in your life where people have not really treated your arguments well because they did not ask you proper questions first? Tell me how that was in the comments section. Tell me how you dealt with it. Give me your arguments and everything. Thanks.